All right, everybody, it's 2 o'clock. It's Wednesday, February 9th, and today's topic with Rita Batchley and coffee with the nurse's nurse is happiness is your job. And this broadcast comes to you live from Oregon City, Oregon, where the nurse's nurse is having her coffee and tea with you. Sit back and relax, and let's just talk about topics that are important to nurses, because it's important to talk about what we feel. And this stuff is huge, what's going on today, because nurses are being physically and emotionally abused. So when I say happiness is your job, or my job, actually, it's every individual's job to be in charge of their own happiness. It's hard when there's stuff going on out there, or even in your personal relationships, that make it difficult to be happy. Like the COVID, for instance, or the staffing issues, or just being in a toxic work environment. Or how about all you nurses out there, new nurses especially, that are being bullied because they're being thrown into an environment that just doesn't have any support for new nurses, and that makes it really hard. And here at the Nurse's Nurse, Coffee with the Nurse's Nurse, I like to talk about different tips and tricks that I could pass on to you guys, because I do have over 30 years of bedside nursing experience, and I have been in toxic work environments, unsupportive work environments, but also, really remarkable nurse environments. And what do we need today more than anything is remarkable nurses like you and me. And what makes us remarkable is our ability to transcend all that stuff that's going on, and be compassionate, caring nurses that can help people transform their lives, because that's what it's about. And the big thing that's going on out there in the world is this idea of, there's policies being written, and right now there is a law they're trying to pass in Congress to stop or put a limit on the amount that registries can charge hospitals for traveler nurses. And this has really caused a lot of a conversation, really good conversation. And I've been engaging on Facebook, my Facebook Show Me Your Stethoscope. And also I recently joined Nurse March, which is the Million Nurse March that is scheduled for May 12th, 2022. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. And also, those are the main Facebook groups that I like to check in with, because I really enjoy hearing what other nurses are saying and how they're dealing with the pandemic and just everything that's out there that's destroying the nurses. I mean, last week I showed a clip on hospital greed, and hospital greed is destroying our nurses. And that is a New York Times piece that I have up on my site. It's on my YouTube channel. And it was live last week on my YouTube channel. Anyway, it had testimonials from nurses in all walks of life. It was so powerful because it really gave credence to how the hospitals have been creating this nursing crisis, this nursing shortage, by purposely understaffing nurses and telling them to deal with it. And now that the pandemic has hit, so many nurses have retired. And also with the vaccine mandates, more nurses are being fired because they're not, they're choosing not to get vaccinated, and that's their choice. It's a different topic that yeah. But today, about happiness being your job, how do you be happy when all of this physical and emotional abuse is going on all around you? And I say, happiness is, first of all, it's an inside job, and it's a full-time job. So it takes a lot of work to recognize when I am looking out there for something, people, places, or things to make me happy. And that's easy to do because, we're, as a human person, as a human being, we're focused out. So our eyes focus out, and we look at, all this bright, shiny stuff that gets us psychologically hooked in to thinking that if I get that next shiny thing, or if my partner just acts a certain way, or my friend does this, then I'm going to be happy. But from my experience, what makes me happy are experiences. And I saw a little like up in the comments. I like that. I'm happy to see people interacting because, yeah, experiences are what make me happy. And more, I'm seeing like tiny houses, people getting rid of their stuff and really downsizing, because stuff does not make us happy. It's about experiences and relationships. And being a nurse has been one of the most rewarding relationships that I could ever have, because it's about having a job that transforms lives and it transforms people. But in this industry, or in this environment that we have, where corporations are pushing nurses to the brink, it's really frightening, actually, because I feel like the nursing profession might not ever recover from this, and that the way that they're processing students, throwing them out there into the world and not giving them the support that they need to be mentored and really really embraced into this sisterhood or brotherhood, fellowship of nurses, to be a good nurse, to be compassionate, and what that means, and to honor the time that it takes to do that, and money. It takes a lot of money to train a good nurse. So one of the things I wanted to show you guys, this little thing on what's going on in the world today, the poor staffing, the lack of administrative support, and you guys can read the workplace violence is huge. And one of the issues that I wanted to put out there was this issue of combat pay. Now, Congress, there's two things that are in for RN policy. There's laws they're trying to set up. Nurses are trying to push for safe staffing ratios. And Congress, there's also a law to limit the amount that traveler companies can charge for nurses. And to me, yeah, that's really pushing the nurses to the brink. I mean, a lot of nurses are on these websites, and I'm going to go. This page was brought to us by the nursesagainstviolence.org, who are also in charge of this National Nurses March. And if you go to the join their Facebook page, National Nurses March, you'll see that this march is going to be held on Thursday, May 12th. And they are going to address, number one, the staffing ratios, the federal law that would support safe staffing ratios throughout the United States. They are pushing laws to protect nurses against violence. More and more nurses are being physically abused, and that is just not going to work. Nurses are just, It's this trickle down effect where the patients are melting down from these long wait times, not having enough staff, being told, I'll be back in a minute, and the nurse comes back 2 hours later, and it's just not working for the patients either. And many patients are physically acting out, there's never an excuse to hit or violently or even emotionally abuse with words, but laws need to be passed, and this march will address that on May 12th, but also fair and realistic wages for nurses. So if you get on there and subscribe, that would be awesome. And I'm going to hide that and come back to you guys. Glad to be here. Glad you're here, and glad you're showing up for you, because that's number one, admitting that this stuff is painful. It's hard. It's something we can't do alone. We need each other. And that's one of my calls to action to you, is to put it out there to join one of these groups, either Show Me Your Stethoscope or this new group called Nurse March, which I'd really love to be a speaker at that. I would love to get up. I mean, I would be scared, of course, but I'd love to get up in front of a million nurses and just pour out my gratitude and my love for this profession and what you guys do on a daily basis, and how just to say how hard it is, but also to give you my kudos and to give you that support and that leadership of standing true to yourself and getting the help you need to be a caring nurse and not to be burned out. For me, getting into trauma therapy after I was in a horrific wildfire in 2018, I could no longer do bedside nursing because of the trauma that I sustained. And I went through somatic therapy and PTSD therapy. And it's been a long road coming back from, it's just like a really dark place. So I really understand what it's like to feel like you just can't go on. And that really put me up to doing this Coffee with the Nurse's Nurse and getting stuff out on YouTube or out in the world to help support nurses, so we can create a community that we're safe to talk about this stuff. Because I was really angry, really, really angry. And I belonged to a nurses union for a long time. I was a chief nurse rep for over 700 nurses in the county of Ventura. I fought for better wages. I fought for the safe staffing ratios that we have in California today. And I feel like that empowered me to empower you and to help you see that, you know what, it doesn't have to stay this way. People do change and things do change, because I really strongly believe that we will do better if we can do better. It's like shooting arrows out into the world. They're not hitting a target. But if we have a target and we know what we want, we can achieve it. That's why I really like that this Nurses March in May is focusing on these three issues, which is safe staffing ratios. Number 2, protections against violence on nurses. And number 3, fair and realistic wages. And yeah, that's a huge issue. Hospital CEOs are making millions of dollars per year and crying and telling the budgets, and the budgets of the hospitals are not allowing for raises for nurses to keep up with the pandemic, to attract and retain nurses. What I found most interesting, or an aha moment, as Oprah would say, is in that video, Hospital Greed is Destroying Our Nurses, that today, more than any time in history, there are more licensed nurses. There is not a shortage of nurses, people. There is a shortage of nurses who will work under the conditions in the hospitals today. And that is huge. That is a big piece of truth that we can change, and we can change this together. And coming together as a group of women and men, not that many, but some male nurses out there, and kudos to you for being part of our fellowship and our nursing brothers and sisters, that we can work together to change what's going on. And a big part of it is hospitals do not have to be transparent. They have laws that protect them from people coming in and looking at what gets reported and what doesn't. And they can silence a lot of stuff. And one of the issues I have, with JACO, like JACO Joint Commissions coming around, and they're looking in our cupboards and they're making sure everything's clean, and that's great. But do they look at the staffing? And when they look at the staffing, how do they pull a nurse out of active duty to interview her about staffing and leave the other nurses short-staffed to deal with all of her patients while they interview her? Like, that alone should be against the law, because nurses should be able to have other nurses come in. They need nurses that are on staff or on the clock that come in just to break nurses so that they can have their 30 minutes or an hour, whatever they do get for lunch, and for their 15-minute breaks during the day, just so they can have a nice, peaceful reprieve. And that's what I mean about happiness is your job. If we're not speaking up for what we need, it's like, hurt me once, shame on you. Hurt me twice, shame on me. Because if we're allowing that to continue to happen, we're becoming victims. And that victim mentality, there's this whole, what they call triangulation. We become this shame and blame society where we become the victims. There's a perpetrator and a hero. Now, nurses are heroes, but that term just gets overplayed and overused to a point where it turns around on us, because when we're told, or we complain or say, like, there's not enough staffing today. Well, Susie over in your unit is not complaining about it. She has the same amount of patients as you do. You're a strong nurse. Why can't you do what Susie's doing? It's like, what? So, the acuities of our patients are different. Nurses need to speak up and say what they're needing. And there needs to be an accountability for the hospitals to be accountable to JACO and Joint Commissions, that if they're not meeting a certain standard or level of care, and I don't mean surveys of patients who got disrespected because they couldn't get ESPN, or their tea or coffee wasn't reheated for them. I'm talking about life and death stuff here, or even just the basic care that nurses provide, and getting ancillary help for nurses so that they can be free to do education and medical interventions while somebody can be provided with a job, a good paying job, to get them tea and fix our ESPN on the television, and that it's not all on the nurse running around doing all this stuff. So that coordination of care comes from these higher standards. And I got to say, I got to align myself with those higher standards, because helping myself has to be number one. Helping myself be strong and knowing what my boundaries are. Because if I can't set healthy boundaries for me, I can't set them for anybody I can't do this for anybody else. And the way to do that, yeah, get some safe staffing ratios out there and negotiate. Oh my gosh, nurses, we got to learn how to negotiate for fair wages and, wages that coincide with the amount of education and skill that we have. Because that, nobody's telling the hospitals to cut the pay of the CEOs so that they can give more money to the nurses, and that's a problem. So, how do you become this nurtured individual, a nurtured nurse? And that is my gift to you over the next, well, I'm still developing and putting out there videos, and stay in tune. My call to action to you is to go on to my Facebook page, The Nurse's Nurse, and join me there. You can also support me by buying my book. You can read more about some of my adventures. Well, my little hero, Shiro, I call her, Paige. She is a nurse who has suffered a lot over this type of hospital greed, and she's one of the victims of hospital greed, destroying a hospital, destroying a community, and what she does to fight back to get her hospital to listen and develop policies and principles for nursing support. And that's my little the way you can support me is just keep tuning in, tell other people, share it. This is mostly about, getting community with my fellow nurses, and a place to put in the chat even. Let's see, I'm going to go check my chat on here if there's any comments. And that's one of the problems with the Facebook feed, is that I don't get my comments here, live viewer comments. Through that, it has to only be on there on the Nurse's Nurse feed, but that'll come. And I just feel really strongly about just showing up and being this voice for nurses, because it is really hard to get up here and get out here and say this stuff, because maybe as nurses, as women, we're just told, oh, it's really not nice to complain. It's really not ladylike, or any of this stuff that I've heard growing up. But I know that the truth is that the world needs nurses more than ever. We need nursing values in our communities, in our hospitals, and we need them to be supported. And we need nurses to be uplifted so they can do their job and make the world a better place, because nurses do make the world a better place. And I love nurses, and I want to keep supporting them and creating this space for us to be who we are and be the great, wonderful, supported, uplifted, happy people that we could be. And that takes support and work like this. So I'm going to sign out for this week, unless I see any other comments or questions I could come across. Yeah. And don't forget your call to action. Join one of those other groups. Show Me Your Stethoscope, or Nurse March, or just dial in to Nurses Against Violence, Dr. Sandra Rialdi. She's heading that up, and she looks like a brilliant leader to help us come together and unite And it doesn't have to be a union like people, they shy away from unions. I happen to belong to the American Nurses Association and National Nurses United. And when I was practicing in California, I belonged to the California Nurses Association, which is also National Nurses United. And I do like to be a part of those bigger organizations, because what gets things done is changing these laws in Congress, but also not only that, the nurses have to stick up and say, enough is enough. I can't do this. Because even after the laws were passed in California, and we do have ratio laws, if a nurse did not speak up and say that the ratio was inappropriate for her skill or just the capacity of how many patients she was expected to take care of, the hospital would just pile that on her. And there was no way to police the ratio laws for many, it took a long time, and it took a lot of nurses pushing back. And we want to keep our profession alive and well and full of compassion and caring. And just thank you all for coming and joining me and being part of this journey. And I'll see you next week at Coffee with the Nurse's Nurse. Bye.